One fateful day in Britain's royal palace, the aging King Lear decides that the time has come to divide his kingdom amongst his three daughters, Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia. Rather than take into account their leadership qualities or other relevant attributes to make this incredibly important decision, Lear demands that each of his daughters declare how much they love him. His elder offspring, Goneril and Regan, make a sickly sweet show of flattery, each trying to outdo the other in the adoration of their father. Disgusted by this clearly false performance, Cordelia refuses to play a part in it, stating that she loves her father only as much as she is obligated to, no more, no less. Lear is outraged by her response and immediately disowns her, dividing her share between Goneril and Regan instead. Cordelia is not left to fend for herself, however, as the King of France, who is in attendance and admires Cordelia's honesty, proposes to marry her even though she doesn't have a dowry. He is not the only one to find this whole situation bizarre either, as the Earl of Kent, one of Lear's loyal nobles, pipes up to protest the king's decision, and is promptly banished as a result. Despite this unfair treatment, Kent remains loyal to his king, and decides to continue serving him anyway in disguise. Elsewhere in the kingdom, treachery is afoot, as Edmund, the illegitimate son of the Duke of Gloucester, concocts a scheme to get rid of his half-brother Edgar, who is in line to inherit his father's title and all that he has. He forges a letter which implies that Edgar is plotting to kill their father, and the Duke of Gloucester takes the bait, becoming suspicious of Edgar's intentions. Now in control of half the kingdom, Goneril starts to show her true colors, complaining to her steward Oswald about her father's upcoming visit, and instructing him to treat the king disrespectfully in the hopes that he will leave. Lear is understandably shocked by Goneril and Oswald's coldness towards him, since he has just given her half the kingdom. But when she demands that he reduce the number of his followers, he curses her and decides to try his luck with Regan instead. The disguised Duke of Kent manages to sneak his way back into Lear's service, and is sent ahead with a letter to Regan's palace to prepare her for the king's arrival. In Gloucester's castle, Edmund continues his dastardly scheme to discredit his half-brother Edgar, warning him that their father suspects him of treachery and advising him to flee before it is too late. Confused, Edgar takes his advice and leaves, only for Edmund to wound himself and pretend that Edgar's attacked him on the way out. With this apparent proof of Edgar's disloyalty, Gloucester fully buys into Edmund's plot and declares Edgar as an outlaw. Regan and her husband, the Duke of Cornwall, now arrive at the castle and commend Edmund for his show of bravery. Soon after, Kent turns up, bearing the letter from the king, and encounters the crusty Oswald, Goneril's steward. They begin to argue over how Oswald has behaved towards Lear, and Kent ends up attacking him. Regan and Cornwall intervene, and Kent is placed in the stocks as punishment, despite Gloucester's protests. Now homeless and a fugitive, Edgar disguises himself as a disoriented beggar named Poor Tom, and decides to remain close to home despite the danger. When Lear arrives at Gloucester's castle, he is shocked to find his servant in the stocks and demands an explanation from his daughter. Much to his horror, Regan is entirely unsympathetic and joins forces with her sister in insisting that their father dismiss his entire band of knights. Feeling powerless and betrayed, the devastated Lear curses both his daughters and marches out into a raging storm, accompanied only by his fool. Finally set free from his bondage, the still disguised Kent goes out into the stormy heath to search for the king, and encounters a gentleman who points him in the right direction. Realizing that they need backup, Kent gives the man a message to take to Cordelia, asking her to help her father. Meanwhile, Lear wanders the heath, battling the storm and his own growing madness. The fool tries unsuccessfully to comfort him, but luckily Kent finds the miserable pair and guides them towards a hovel for shelter. Uneasy about the way Lear has been treated, Gloucester confides in his supposedly loyal son Edmund that he has received word about a French invasion led by Cordelia. He plans to help the king despite the danger of going against Goneril and Regan, but Edmund spies another opportunity to betray his family and gain more power. Inside the hovel, Lear, Kent, and the fool meet Edgar, who is still disguised as Poor Tom, and the sorry group of outcasts empathize with each other's sad stories until Gloucester arrives and urges the reluctant Lear to come with him to a safer place. Little does he know that back at home, Edmund is ratting him out to the Duke of Cornwall, who becomes enraged, but promises to reward Edmund for this information. Gloucester leads the ragtag group to a farmhouse near the castle, where Lear's madness intensifies, and he holds a mock trial for his daughters, with the Fool and Edgar playing along. Eventually, Gloucester tells Lear that he must flee to Dover immediately to meet Cordelia, and begins to prepare for their escape. He is too late, however, as Cornwall and Regan capture Gloucester and accuse him of treason. In a fury, Cornwall gruesomely plucks out Gloucester's eyes, and Regan coldly reveals that it was his own son who betrayed him. The blinded Gloucester is thrust out into the storm to wander the heath alone, but a servant, appalled by the cruelty, attacks Cornwall and severely wounds him before being killed himself by Regan. Blinded and betrayed, Gloucester stumbles through the heath until he encounters his disguised son Edgar. Unaware that it is him that he's speaking to, Gloucester asks to be led to a cliff's edge so he can throw himself off and end his suffering. Moved by the plight of his father, Edgar agrees to guide him, but secretly plans to save his life. Back at Goneril's palace, she and Edmund begin to grow closer, despite the fact that she is already married. But when her husband, the Duke of Albany, arrives, he is shocked by her behavior towards Lear and denounces her cruelty. At this point, a messenger arrives bringing news that Cornwall has died from his injuries and Regan is now a widow. This news worries Goneril, as she suspects her newly single sister may have eyes for Edmund as well. Also suspicious of her sister, Regan questions Oswald about Goneril and Edmund's relationship and orders him to kill Gloucester if he comes across him, as she fears his loyalty to Lear. And it seems her wish will soon be granted, as Gloucester is led blindly to what he believes is a fatally high cliff's edge and throws himself off its precipice. However, it turns out to just be a small hill, as Edgar has no intention of letting his father die this way, and convinces him that he has survived a miraculous fall. The heath seems to be a small place, as the pair soon come across the ranting and raving Lear. Recognizing his king's voice, Gloucester becomes emotional and laments their shared tragedy. There is little time for sympathy, however, as Oswald now enters the scene, attempting to kill Gloucester as he was instructed. Edgar isn't about to let that happen though, and saves his father's life for the second time that day by killing the steward. Before he dies, Oswald gives him a letter which he was meant to deliver to Edmund from Goneril, which urges him to kill her husband so they can be together. As an upright citizen, Edgar decides to do the right thing and expose the plot to Albany. Cordelia's soldiers now find Lear and bring him to the French army camp in Dover. Under her care, Lear gradually regains his sanity and is overwhelmed with guilt and shame for his previous behavior. Cordelia generously forgives him, and the French army prepares for battle against the British. Meanwhile, in the British camp, Edmund meets up with Regan, who questions him about his relationship with her sister, but Edmund assures her that he only has eyes for her. He has his own plans, however, to kill both Lear and Cordelia if the British army wins, and marry either Goneril or Regan, depending on who survives. Albany, Goneril, and their forces now arrive, but Albany is not exactly keen to fight, and hopes that they can resolve things peacefully. In disguise, Edgar privately gives Albany the letter that he took from Oswald, which reveals his wife's plot, and he vows to confront Goneril after the battle. After a short battle, the French army is defeated, and Lear and Cordelia are captured. Just like he planned, Edmund sends them off to prison, but secretly orders them hanged. Oblivious to this treachery, Lear is happy despite their defeat, naively believing that he and Cordelia can live happily together in captivity. The time has come for Albany to confront Edmund about his wife's dastardly intentions, but before he can react, Regan collapses, revealing that she has been poisoned by her sister. Albany arrests Edmund for treason, but Edgar steps in to do one better, challenging his unwitting half-brother to a duel. As the better soldier, Edgar wounds Edmund fatally and reveals his true identity, and full of remorse for what he has done, Edmund confesses to his crimes and tries to reverse the execution order on Lear and Cordelia before it is too late. Realizing that her schemes have failed, Goneril takes her own life by stabbing herself with a dagger. Edgar relays to Albany how his father Gloucester died from the shock and joy of discovering his true identity, but in a final tragic twist, Lear enters carrying the body of Cordelia, who was hung by Edmund's servant before Lear could kill him. The devastation of her death brings his madness back in full force, and he too dies from the overwhelming grief. Loyal to the end, Kent mysteriously hints that he will soon follow his master to the afterlife. And as the last men standing, Albany and Edgar are left to pick up the pieces and resolve the chaos within the kingdom.